Hey, Lowell.
Hey Peter, how are you?
Not too bad. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Good, good, good. Had a good day so far?
Yeah, it's a COVID day.
There's a lot of COVID days here
That's
over
right.
here. Oh, I just crave. I crave at times just being able to just that little routine, not the crazy speed at what it was before, but just being able even to and even before COVID, just traveling on the highways and spent a lot of time in my car, but just even the mindset of navigating through challenges such as driving and getting somewhere at a specific time. I didn't think I would, but I'm missing it a lot.
Yeah, it's a completely different world, but and with kids, it's that much different again.
Yeah.
And what their normal is something that we never would have anticipated before.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And the kids, mine have gone back to school, so there's that routine for them, even for us for a bit. But yeah, things change in regards to the school with them, and uh, the kids were sick a couple of weeks ago, and just trying to navigate through that, and just the changes back and forth
Yep.
in regards to what is new and going back to what was old, and then what is new again. So yeah, like you're saying, every day's it's interesting taking on each and every day.
Yep, you got it.
So we just have some people coming in. Hey, do you see at the bottom, does yours have like a little comment box or a
It
little
does.
area?
Yep,
So people can ask us questions
sure.
in that. And as we get into things, if you see one, they'll start, if there's more than one, they'll start scrolling up a little bit.
Okay,
So I know I lose track at times. So if you see one, feel free to just jump on in.
sounds great.
Yeah. How was it just jumping on? Was it
Pretty
hard?
good.
Pretty easy, huh?
Very.
Oh, they made it.
I hit the accept button and there I am.
That's it.
My face is on the internet
Beauty.
forever. So
Beauty. Hey, and what we'll do as well, we've done it with other ones. We'll look at some parts to like we're doing like super cuts with these. So we'll take the entire, let's say 45 minutes, and then we'll take little bits and pieces.
sure.
So I'll give you the whole thing, and then if there are little bits and pieces you want to use, just let us know.
Sounds great.
Sound good? All right, so why don't we get started? Welcome, everyone. I have Dr. Lowell Grieb on with us today for our Thursday Instagram Live. Lowell is the owner of the Sport Lab. He's a clinician there, sports medicine clinician, has been in the sports medicine area for a long time, but also just a high-level athlete as well, right? From
I wouldn't exactly say I'm a high level
well,
athlete.
you got me on the endurance pieces, right? So the
Fair.
ultra distance in regards to biking, you
Yes.
have call it the longer distance, the endurance pieces in regards to the marathon. So just those parts too in regards to like today it's nice to have you because we're going to talk about the physical components,
hmm
and then we're going to add in the mental skills components. So almost that kind of harmony between the physical and mental, and your professional experience with your sport experience. I think we're going to have a really nice, conversation. But another one is just giving it back to athletes because there is a lot of uncertainty now, and mentally and physically, it's nice to be able to lean on people in regards to their expertise. So I appreciate you being on with us.
Yeah, I'm just going to try to make sure that I don't have Mickey Mouse ears with my lights in the background. Sorry about that,
Yeah,
Peter.
no, you're good. You're good. And also for people, if you have questions for us as we're going through it, just put in the comment area. And before we get started with questions, also if you want to check out Lowell Sports Medicine Clinic, it's out a couple hours away from Toronto. It's in Huntsville,
Yep.
and it's one of its kind out in the area. And if you want to check out Lowell and all the great clinicians that are at the sports lab, it's www.thesportlab.ca.
You got it.
And we'll post it afterwards. And you have access to Lowell on Instagram too at the Sport Lab.
You got it.
Awesome. So question for you. We have the COVID pieces that we started with in regards to our lives.
Hmm.
How have things been in regards to the clinic, but in regards to people coming into your clinic, in regards to injuries and bumps and bruises that go on with their sport? Have things changed at all?
Things have changed in that we are now seeing more athletes and active individuals. That's the group of people that we work with that may be having issues with more long-term repetitive strain things. So I think what COVID has really done is we've got a lot of people coming out of the woodwork and participating in sport, and maybe people that are participating in sport that weren't used to participating in sport, at least at the level they are now. So if you go into any outfitter or sports shop in the area here looking for a canoe or paddleboard or any other type of outdoor gear, you just can't find it. And I suspect that's because of the demand, right? And we're starting to see that demand in the clinic as well, as we're starting to see people having injuries that they may not otherwise would have had, but because they've taken up something new to fill in the time,
Right.
then we're starting to see this. And even with the competitive athletes that may not be able to participate directly in their sport, they are doing other things that they may not have wanted to, and that is starting to build separate challenges that we're seeing from a clinical perspective.
Right.
For instance, you might have a triathlete who is so focused on swim, bike, run, but knowing that they can't compete in swim, bike, run, they're going to take up paddleboarding.
Right.
That's a whole different world of kinematics as it relates to shoulder, mid-back, lower back mobility that they're not used to having as a triathlete. So that can lead to potential injury.
Yeah, and the last few months with COVID and starting these Instagram lives, having a lot of athletes in and high level athletes who, in order to mentally kind of cope with what's going on, they've tried new things because they've just been interested, and they become super competitive in a sport that's not their sport.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, as you're mentioning that and thinking back to other interviews, that is something that you kind of think about with the athlete and go, fantastic that you're doing this,
Mm-hmm.
but there are some possible costs that come with physically of trying something new or trying this new kind of workout regimen.
Yeah. And I think there's some benefit from a cognitive, psychological perspective because it breaks the monotony of what the norm has been, right? Like runners, I'm a runner now, and you put your running shoes on and you run and run and run and run and run and run, and that's all you do.
Right.
But now with COVID, it's allowed us to start thinking, maybe I want to spend some time in my canoe, or maybe I want to spend more time on my bike. And but have we prepared our bodies for those activities?
Right.
And a lot of the time,
and you think it's transferable, right? Like you think those, especially for those who are active or were active before, that those kind of physical skills would transfer into these different sports, where it sounds like for some, there's been some challenges physically on trying to take on something new.
Yeah. Well, and physically, cardiovascularly, strength-wise, probably, but they're able to take on something new. But have they prepped their body from a mobility perspective to be able to take on these new loads? And they may or may not have. And that's where we're starting to see different injuries, not necessarily repeat injuries or the standard injury, like a runner, well, I twisted my ankle from running. Well, yeah, we expect that, right? Versus the runner that comes in and says, my shoulder's bugging me. Well, why is your shoulder bugging you? Right. Well, I've decided I kind of cross-train with paddleboarding, right? So that upright high stance now, you never have your arms in that position as a runner.
Right. Hey, now even, and you got me kind of thinking about myself and then others who have been talking to, like, are there any sort of best practices, any sort of tips? I'm almost kind of thinking that you almost kind of like from a preventative kind of perspective, is there anything that you all and yourself bring forward to athletes just to kind of think about in regards to preventing those injuries that might happen?
Well, you bring up an excellent point, and in an optimum world, I would love to be able to have something that I would be offering an athlete. Usually in a clinical space, though, we don't see anybody until they are broken.
Right, right.
So we've actually found that COVID's given us the opportunity to start thinking outside the box a little bit. And you and I have talked about this offline as well, is that we've now had the opportunity to build an entire segment of our business around recovery versus therapy. So the therapy we dictate as those that there's something wrong, there's something injured that we need to fix from a clinical perspective. But the recovery is, what can an athlete do to ensure that they're primed to be able to do what they do so that they do not get injured, right? Or they perform better in what they're doing, right? And that in sports psychology, that's always been the premise, right? But in physiologic medicine, which is typically where sports medicine is putting its energies, that's not something that is considered, right? What's the preventative phase? Well, I'm not going to do prevention. I'm just going to go and do my thing until something goes wrong, and then I'm going to get it fixed.
Right.
Yet, if you do things properly, just like sports psych, you can improve your performance, and you will not get injured.
Yes. But as you're bringing up the sports psych component now with the medical physiological component, to me, what just came up for me is like, from a psych perspective, it's planning, right? But very few people do it, right? So, and you're so right. So in sports psych, we've talked about this, but I think what we're maybe in regards to the practice falling short a little bit is like, okay, how do you do it? Like, what's the method to show people how to do it? In regards to kind of your thinking now and the actual doing part, is there any of maybe the applied parts in regards to recovery physically that you're working on and going to be bringing forward to athletes?
Yeah, there's a handful of things actually. So we packaged this in a almost in a systematic approach where we will look at kinematics or movement patterns of athletes and identify, number one, if there are key challenges that athlete should be working on as compared to norm. Once we understand what sports they're primarily participating in, we can then offer some guidance as to how those kinematics need to change. So we can look at ranges of motion, and we've got technologies to be able to allow us to do that in a very quick and dynamic way. And then we can send that athlete home with a program, a stretching program, for instance, that's going to help them improve their mobility in very specific ways that's going to then translate into better performance in whatever sport that they're participating in. So that's one piece of the puzzle that we've decided to kind of encapsulate into this recovery system that we're utilizing. We're calling it the Recovery Suite, which is a space, I'm actually sitting in it now, where athletes can come in and do some physiologic recovery, as well as be evaluated on a kinematic level to ensure that they're doing work outside to be able to perform properly. And then we've got some cognitive recovery as well, which we're working on and working with as well, which is kind of an interesting modality as well.
Yeah. Can you just maybe elaborate more on the kinematic part in regards to would an athlete come in and there's this kind of testing to baseline, or is it just, hey, you're unique, every athlete's unique, and then we have to make something that is particular to you as this athlete?
So that's where the art of the collaboration with our practitioners fits in. So as the medical lead of the practice, I oversee and have the understanding of the relationship between sport and movement. And then we have a kinesiologist who is working on the movement end of things. So they will
Right.
do a full range of motion assessment.
Right.
And then I collaborate with them to be able to identify, for instance, if somebody has bilateral tight pectoralis major, right, your pec muscles, your chest, is that a problem if you are a runner from a kinematic perspective and from a movement perspective? That's up to me to figure out and then help our kinesiologists say, okay, well, yeah, that's a problem. This
Right.
person has very poor movement. So we're going to work on mobilizing their pecs,
Okay.
right? So that we can get into more shoulder extension through that elbow drive of the run, right? Where if I'm limited because my pecs are tight, that's going to impede my motion as a runner.
Right.
So that's where there's a joint effort between practitioners. So there's collecting data, but data is only as good as doing something with it, right?
Right.
And that's where the skill of the practitioners fits in
Right.
in our practice.
Yeah, and as you explain it so well, like I'm thinking from the runner, from the hockey player, from the basketball player with different similar movement, but those different movements for their sport, where just kind of understanding where you are and how you can just improve it. And for the people that you work with, for some it's a fraction of a second for them as athletes, or needing to get to a certain spot or space at a particular time, and that could be just so valuable in regards to them performing in real time.
Absolutely. I mean, 2% improvement in the marathon for a high performance athlete, even. Like, you've got a 3-hour marathoner, which is that real barrier for, you know, a competitive age group athlete, a 3-hour marathon. So 180 minutes, 2%, you're sitting in around that, you know, 3-4 minute. That's a lot of time.
Yeah, and for the people who are in those sports that you just for running, but other sports, that means so much, right? So for maybe other people not in that sport, you know, a minute or a few seconds, but for those sports that people hold that so dear to them in regards to those outcomes, that maybe that is a part or a piece of this puzzle that could really make those changes.
Yeah, if people are trying to be podium bound, like, the difference on the podium, generally speaking, is 1% or less.
Yeah.
So if you're not within that 1%, you're not going to get there.
Yeah.
Yet all of these little bits and pieces that elite athletes, this is ingrained in their brain, right? You need to have the physiologic stuff. You have to have the nutrition components together. You got to have all the recovery, and you have to have all the gear and gadgets to go along with it. And you've got to have the sports psych, and you've got to, all these pieces fit in the bigger picture.
Right.
And they get it, right? The elite get it.
Yeah.
Or some of them get it. But those recreational athletes that are looking to perform and podium in what is still considered an elite field, they're not necessarily taking these considerations in. And if they did, they would perform that much better.
Yeah. And even and I'm not sure as people come in and who are here with us today or who's going to watch afterwards, but I know for our headset group, they're those emerging athletes, right? The high level competitive high school, like up to 18, university, minor pro, and these are the moments where they start to take on these challenges. And again, they're all intertwined, right? But if you can kind of merge these together, then you kind of have this athlete who's, the word that comes to mind is just, they feel prepared. They're ready, right? So,
that's like the hot word in the industry right now is state of readiness.
Right.
And you will, almost every sport performance company that's producing something from a consumer level now is dictating, you know, what's the state of readiness, right?
Yeah.
And they all have their own proprietary methodology of figuring out what, you know, the state of readiness is. But in reality, it's all the pieces of the puzzle that have been put together that allow you to be ready to perform. Yeah.
And as you say that, it's that recipe, right? And your recipe is different from my recipe, who's different from that athlete who came into the clinic today. But it's a matter of trying to figure out what it is, because it does take time, and it is work, right? So it's time, it's coming in, talking to you, maybe talking to me, and and others. But once you get it, it's very interesting kind of when an athlete, it does come together.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting to listen to someone, at least in my role, to kind of go, yeah, it's coming for you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like for you all too, it's really getting that athlete to get to that place.
Well, and it's also having the athlete understand that there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, right? And you don't need to solve all the pieces overnight, but there's a means of evolving as an athlete to be able to start putting these pieces of the puzzle together so that ultimately you perform, right? Just going out and doing your training that's one piece of the puzzle.
Right. Yeah, I like that part, and I hope if there are young athletes who are listening to us, it's a process and it evolves, right? So your current year will be different from your next year. So maybe there's some tweaks, but you to stay where you are based on this new undertaking, this environment, you got to somehow change your recipe. Maybe it's slightly to take on whatever the new challenge is.
It's just like anything else. To be an expert in any field, it takes time, and there's no shortcuts. I mean, how long have you been practicing what you're doing?
Yeah. Oh, and even kind of, what am I learning from our conversation that I'm going to, right? And that's the beauty of it. Challenging, but the beauty, right? And it's that patience, and it's hard to tell an athlete when they have these great things in the horizon that it's process oriented, right? Yep. So go through it with this diligence, right? And I get the speed part, that you want to get there quicker, but there is something about just working on that recipe to be in that position, right? That opportunity when it comes. Hey, can I ask you, like you mentioned, and I love that kind of that recovery suite. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that, and just even come to mind, that's transferable as they're during? Because these athletes are starting to come back slowly.
Yep.
Is there any parts of the recovery suite that's proactive that you can do be reactive but quickly?
Yeah. There is. Most of the technologies that we utilize are mobile technologies.
Okay.
So the plus is, just over my shoulder, a foam roller, for instance. You can take that anywhere, and if you know how to use the tool, that tool can be used as an asset to you. Mm. And just like, your preparatory work in sports psychology, right? You've got a series of things that you do to prepare your body, both physically and mentally, for performance. That particular item may be part of the plan, right?
Oh, awesome.
Right? It may be some muscle activation stuff that you learn. It might be some rotations of your hip because you've got restrictions somewhere, that's just part of your game plan. Yes. To allow you to mobilize better so that you can perform better. So there's lots of little innuendos that come out of the practice of really what the recovery suite is to learn as an athlete what you need to do.
Right.
And then you can transfer those skills from here.
Yeah, and this is a little bit more in regards to the kind of the headset sports psych preparation, but it's just preparation in general. Like we have a checklist. Yep. That we just say, in general, this is what athletes need to take care of. And one of them, even though it's broad for us, it's you need to bring your devices, right? You need to bring, if it is the foam roller, you got to remember, it's your equipment. It's your preparation equipment that need to be, in this sense, packed. Yeah. But you need to be able to do this before time. And I love that you mentioned it. It's preparation physically, yeah, that could make you be your very best for when you're ready to perform.
And I worked with athletes outside of the clinic that, here's your list. And we talk about a list of things they need to do. And I'm a big stickler on fueling properly too. That's another large aspect of our business is educating people on proper fueling. And we've had athletes show up, and part of their checklist is you got to come with a bottle of water. I'm like, where's your bottle of water? Don't have it. Yeah. Well, training session's over. Right. You're not prepared. Yeah. It's like showing up without shoes. Not going to happen.
Right.
So And then that lesson's learned really quickly, and every single time they show up with their fuel.
Yeah, and again, it's ownership, right? It truly is.
Yeah.
Hey, and I know this is such a broad question, but I'm just thinking if anything that we can give from your experience and expertise. But I know this is just there's so many things that you can say right now, but are there any kind of go-to must-haves, nutrition, or with the physical preparation pieces that athletes must do?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question.
I gotta apologize, like, because every sport's different. But is there like, you just say it over and over again, right? Like, it's just outside the bottle of water. Like, any other go-to ones that you like? I say this often.
So fueling is definitely a big piece, right? So if people are not coming with hydration of some sort, a lot of the sport that I work in is in endurance sport. So that needs to be augmented with more than just water. So whatever that discussion is between myself and that athlete, then that is something that they should be showing up with. And then the recovery aspects. So it may not be preparatory before, but there's aspects of after. And that might be as simple as making sure that you bring a beach towel so you can do some mobility work, right? So that you don't have excuses not to be able to do what you need to do to be able to perform.
Right.
I mean, each athlete's a little bit different, but a lot of runners, mobility, you just include it as part of your post-run. So you need the tools to be able to mobilize. You already have your body, you already have your shoes, but if you need a blanket or a yoga mat or something to be able to do your mobility on, bring it.
Yeah.
Right? If you need to throw a sweatshirt on because you're going to get chilled, that's part of your sport equipment.
Right.
So that you can perform what you need to do at the time you need to do it.
Yeah. And this is just, I'm thinking running, I'm thinking outside of running and endurance sports, that you have to bring your equipment and find your space to do your post-training competition.
Yep.
Oh, like, and including, and this is not the time, but your psychology piece too. Like, it all has to, whatever the time frame is and where you're going to do it, it needs to be done.
Absolutely. So if journaling is part of your work even from a nutrition or fueling perspective, right? So you do that reflective piece immediately. If you don't do it immediately, it's not going to be in your head. And we actually ask our athletes to do that from a fueling perspective as well, not just some of the sports psych aspects and performance metrics aspects, but what did you do with your fuel? Did you recover with fuel properly and in a timely fashion? And what does that look like to you? And then it's ingrained, right?
Yeah.
Do you have to journal that forever as an athlete? Maybe not, because you finally learn it after months of utilizing the tools. But that is, again, something that we look at.
But as you mentioned, that the really good or great athletes, those elite people, even though it becomes ingrained, I know from my experience, from the mental skills, they'll come back to it and they'll tell you, right? Oh, yeah, I've been away from it for a few days. I got to do it again. You're like, yeah, you know what? That's rather than I haven't done this the entire season, or I'll wait till next season. The person who, even if it becomes routine, they still reflect and go, all right, I still need to take care of this. And I'll let you know that I'm going to take care of it.
Because they ultimately see the value in it.
Yeah.
Right. My sense is that there's some accountability to themselves, which is amazing from a kind of self-efficacy perspective. And I mean, you could talk probably days on end on the importance of that. But it's also the fact that now it's like, I forgot to do that. And I'm starting to connect the dots on why my performance may have been impeded, because I started going through some of the reflection of what I'm supposed to be doing from a physical perspective, from a nutritional perspective, from a cognitive, psychological perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And everyone, if you have questions for Lowell, just put them in, right? There's a comment section. Please feel free at any time to ask us questions. We'll get to it, and then we can have a conversation as we go through it. So let us know. So here's the next one for me as we're kind of going through things. So we have the recovery suite, which is a little bit more in regards to the preparation, proactive pieces in getting you ready for games and the next game. But the clinic, it's a sports medicine clinic, and athletes come in because they're hurt. There's a lot of people who are injured. Mm-hmm. What separates someone who takes on injury more effectively than someone else, would you say?
What do you mean by that, Peter?
Okay, so, and again, and this is more of a, I'm coming from a psych, but I'm going to kind of try to bring it into the physical piece as well. So in the psychology of exercise, I have found over the years that certain athletes take on the challenges, be it cognitive, emotional, right? Those parts, athlete, and like the cognitive, the perspective pieces and the diligence better than others. Mm-hmm. Right. And to me, I haven't done research on it, but I believe the athlete who takes on injury psychologically in a certain way, they may come back quicker. Right. And again, there's no data that I have for my own clients, but are there things, behaviors, the way of their thinking of athletes that you dealt with where you, in taking on injury, you went, okay, I'm trusting him or her because it feels like he or she has it, versus that person where you go, okay, this person may be not in that same sort of vein in regards to their behavior or thinking.
So part of the therapy process is a psychological intervention as well, or a sales piece from kind of a medicine perspective.
Okay.
There is a spectrum of clients that we see. And I'll talk kind of to the spectrum. I'll break it into three sections. Okay. There's the athlete that shows up and the expectation is that I am going to do the work and they are going to walk out the front door better.
Okay.
That doesn't work.
Okay.
That's not the way physiology is built. That is not going to happen. Part of what we do in a rehab world is we identify if there's problems from a physiologic, primarily perspective, and where in the physiology do we need to make interventions. And interventions generally are small challenges so that the body can adapt. It's no different than what you do from a sports psych, right? Yeah. You give a stimulus, you let the body adapt to the stimulus, right? And that's what we do in physical medicine as well. So those people in the middle are those that are motivated to get better. I can help them, but they are more importantly going to be helping themselves. Because part of our clinical practice is being able to give them the right things to do on their own time.
Gotcha.
Okay. And those people tend to respond extraordinarily well because they're taking the instruction, they're working with the instruction, they're engaging in the process. And as we work through progressions with them and progressively increase loads or progressively increase stressors that they need to adapt to, they bounce back quickly.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, this is clinical observation. Right. And then we have the other end of the spectrum, which I would probably put myself in before I learned medicine. And that's the group of people that are the type A that feel that more is better.
Right.
And if I say you need to go and do 10 push-ups, they will go and do 100 push-ups.
Right.
And then wonder why the next time they're just not feeling so well. And like, we're trying to rehab your shoulder and you're at the 10 threshold. So when you do 100, you're not really helping yourself, right? And that group of people, you kind of have to reel in a little bit and spend extra time. I find this clinically in that there has to be an awful lot of extra time spent for them to understand that I get that you have an extraordinarily big and large drive to perform, but we need to keep the reins pulled in until you're ready to be running free again.
Yeah.
And however that's explained to them, like if you do it well as a clinician, you kind of pull them back, they start seeing the changes. And as soon as they start seeing the changes, you've got them working with you.
Yeah.
And I might hear from them once or twice a week. I'm like, I'm feeling great there. Great. Up your repetitions by X number, right? Because you're feeling well. If you start getting any discomfort or pain, let me know right away. and we're just going to modulate that rehab. So it's a create the stressor, adapt, create the stressor, adapt, and keep improving up that state of readiness until they're ready to get back into their sport full time again.
Yeah, and as you're talking, like you're that constant sort of, they're bouncing off ideas, you're their emotional support, you're their physical support, and you're going through it. And like it kind of, again, is that you're helping them through that process, because it is a process, right? Even when they're away from the clinic, you're still there helping them through that process.
Yeah, it's a dance.
And I didn't put this forward to you earlier, but the dance, I love that you mentioned that. How do you do the dance when you're trying to bring in something new, right? And again, and if this might be a question that we need to have another talk on, but athletes, when they're used to the tried and true, but sometimes I'm sure you have to do things that are new to them, that they have to trust you in it. And that to me is, you're moving the dance, like, but they might be not moving their feet with you.
So I'll use an analogy to explain this. I have been in the competitive sporting world for quite some time. I competed in ultra distance mountain biking, as you had mentioned at the beginning, which are 12 or 24-hour mountain bike races. And I raced competitively in that for about 4 or 5 years. And at one point in time, it was suggested that I, maybe pull a sports psych into my team. And I knew that I should, but did I? Mm-hmm. No. So I go through that career and I study medicine and get back into sport and started running, and met you along the way. And maybe you threw me under the bus along the way, but that's a whole nother discussion.
That's another one. Off camera.
There's a point where I got to know more about you, and there was a trust that was built between myself and you. Myself as an athlete, not as a clinician, but between myself and you. At that point and you had just started were starting Headset, I'm like, this. My apologies.
Oh, just a little bit. Yeah, you're good. You're good.
My phone was ringing off the hook there.
Yeah.
I built that trust with you, and I took the plunge. Right, and that's when I started becoming engaged in something that I should have done decades ago. And I think that's what we see clinically as well, is if somebody comes in with an expectation of something, I need to fulfill the expectation to a certain degree, right? Before I start introducing something new. But before I start introducing something new, it's my sense that that client of mine needs to have a trust in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And when they trust you, they will listen to you because they see you as that subject matter expert. And when they see that and that's instilled in their brain, they're going to be like, yeah, you know what you're doing. I'm going to let you do what you do.
Yeah. And again, this might be another. I'm just thinking, they're the openness that someone has physically. I know the mental part that you're talking about, but a body allowing someone to move it in a certain direction, mm-hmm. and the trust has to be it has to be there, right? And not to take it and take away the mental skills part, but to just move your body in a certain way with someone helping you. It's got to be the utmost of trust. It has to be.
Yeah. When you're working with somebody in hands-on world, they need to trust what you're doing.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned Headset, and we've had conversations outside of this, the Instagram for Headset. But could you see the program being helpful, like for the recovery, the recovery suite piece, or the psychology, the injury piece? Do you see
100%? Absolutely. The nice thing is anytime that you can work at your own pace versus at a dictated pace is helpful.
Hmm.
in general, I think. When you're working with an athlete population that's up to their, eyes in training, and most of us are not professional athletes, so we've got our full-time job, and then we're trying to squeeze in training. And then historically it's been, well, now I've got my hour consult with my sports psych, then I need to drive downtown Toronto or downtown wherever to get to, which now is becoming a 3-hour appointment. It becomes something that becomes a burden, right?
Hmm.
And there can be some resent when there is burden put on clients, which is our treatment model is the same way. We try not to have people in the clinic all the time. The great thing with Headset is that you can just log in, right? And you can start working on improving your performance from a psychological perspective immediately. And that's why I like it. It's awesome. Like, I'm done my day and I'm like, hey, I know I want to commit an hour or an hour and a half to my psychology this week. I don't need to say it's going to be at 8 a.m. on Monday morning.
Right.
It allows me some flexibility in being able to do it and yet still be able to get it in and help me.
Yeah. And as you say that, it's you don't want the actual undertaking to be that barrier, right? That the extras that go into it.
Yep.
And in no time and still do that type of work, the applied work face to face or through Zoom or in different video based platforms now. But you want something that you can on your time when you do have free time. And for some of these athletes that we work with, it's at night, it's early in the morning because their day is packed with sporting activities, but it could be going to school. It could be that part-time job as well. So I appreciate that.
And the other tidbit that should be considered is that most of your viewers, yes, they're athletes, but they're not high performance, professional athletes, right? You look at the 4-hour marathoner, right? Your average marathoner.
Mm-hmm.
Not only when you use a tool like this will you benefit in your sporting activities, but these skills are directly transferable into life, right? They're directly transferable into your job. And that's, I think, another huge benefit that you have with Headset is that these things can help an individual no matter what they're doing. Yes, it's sport focused, but the tools, I think, have cross-platform that can help them in other things that they do as well.
Yeah. And just even kind of bring it back to where we started with the suite that you talked about for recovery, that it's multi-pronged or multi-pillared in regards to, hey, these are options will help you in regards to understanding what your needs are, but here they are, right? And that allows people to have a little bit of that ownership piece. And when you have that ownership and help, that confidence and that resilience, because it is like you had to bounce back. It's not going to be an easy ride. That really does come a little bit quicker is not the right word, but you know that it's within your grasp that you can lean on it a little bit. And I love that's kind of the offering for your clinic is that's kind of what the underpinnings of that recovery suite are. Yeah. And one of our group members here who's on with us, the lessons I've learned through sport have served well in other areas of life, and I agree. And Lowell, like as you're mentioning, so poignant in regards to what can be done.
Mm-hmm.
But in regards to just even the physical parts, right? I'm just even just even thinking, and you got me going in regards to working from home now. Like, how do you, as I'm in a chair all day and sitting more and maybe going out for these afternoon activities that I'm not preparing myself for, I'm just adding them in my day, that just being thoughtful of what needs to be done, that's a big part of sport at a high level, but also for those who are just taking it on.
Absolutely. Yeah, sorry.
A call in there.
Yeah.
Hey, as we're kind of closing things up, can you kind of let people know if they're interested, kind of what the process is for just getting in touch with you or the sports lab?
We can. quite easy. You can either reach out to us through one of our social media channels. Our handles at the Sport Lab, or you can go to our website, as you had mentioned at the beginning. It's www.thesportlab.ca, and there's a contact section there. And I'm happy to fill in either the therapy end of things, the nutrition end of things, or the recovery suite end of things. I'd be happy to help athletes out in any capacity that I can there.
Awesome. Hey, are there any kind of online components to it yet, like that people could go into the website or go into a certain, is that?
We don't yet.
Okay.
I think that we've been a very hands-on group, and I see partnerships with Headset in the future, though.
Yeah.
So,
No, and we thought, but what comes out, and I know you're putting all this together and every day doing that work face to face, hands on. But when things, if you don't mind, when things do come out, like
Yep.
just there's always things coming out with you all and all the great clinicians there. But if you can let us know and we can post, like I'll post just the handle on our Instagram here, the website. But as new things come out, if you don't mind just keeping us up to date, then we can put out to our newsletter and just start to continue to just share that message.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. I want to add one thing at the end here
Go.
that I think is good from a cognitive perspective. Many of the high performance, high level age group athletes that we see tend to be very neurologically imbalanced, in that their autonomic nervous systems are very in overdrive all the time. And the autonomic nervous system is that system where you've got the sympathetic, which is that fight, flight, or freeze. Why do you add freeze in? Because when you're driving down the highway, deer don't move. They don't fight or flight, they freeze. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it's the parasympathetic, that rest and digest. And many athletes tend to be sympathetic in nature. And with the onset of COVID, we have a lot more psychological stressors on our life, which tend to be driving that sympathetic nervous system that much more. If there's the opportunity for an athlete to be able to do something that would be more sympathetic parasympathetic in nature, they would benefit from that, balancing their nervous system. And it can be as simple as, box breathing, right? So there's mindfulness techniques, there's meditation, certain forms of yoga, like there's all sorts of things that people can do that are not necessarily a physiologic outcome. It's a psychological, neurologic outcome.
Right.
And that is something that I think is very, very important, because we get fixated on a lot of physical stuff. And even with the recovery suite now, we've taken into consideration some of that neurologic imbalance and have tools to help athletes start balancing their nervous system and becoming more aware of the fact that they are shifting or de-shifting or becoming sympathetically dominant, and then wonder why they're not performing the way they should be.
Yeah. And we've had conversations, you and I, off of this Instagram and talking live, but there are some great devices, and then online you can find so many good interventions. So we've talked about like the Muse headband. That the Toronto company Interaxon creates them. There's one that I have that's in my closet. It's called the M Wave, where it's heart rate variability, right? But a lot of it's feedback, right? It kind of loops things back to where we started, is that you still need feedback, and it could be from a device or a professional to help, because you're not going to do it well the first time if you're not used to it, right? It's a work, right, in regards to being present and calming the mind and body down. So I'm glad you brought that up, because
you never know whether you're doing it properly unless you get feedback from something or somebody, right? So wearables are great because there's that biofeedback.
Right.
and you know that you're enhancing the state that you're supposed to be in because you can hear it, you can see it, you can feel it. And practitioners, I mean, even simple box breathing, right? Like 3 seconds to inhale, 3 seconds to hold, 3 seconds to exhale, 3 seconds to hold, right? That box breathing in and of itself, if in conjunction with making sure that they're breathing from a diaphragm, if a person does that properly 10 breaths, and we do it clinically, I'm like, lay down, breathe.
Yeah.
And they're chest breathers, right? They're using auxiliary muscles. That's a sympathetic state. And it's like, we're not supposed to be doing that. You're not running away from lions and tigers right now.
Right.
So let's just back it up, teach them how to breathe from the diaphragm, do the box breathing for 10 breaths. Say, now open your eyes, tell me how you feel.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
Almost every single time they'll be like, I feel like I am like jello right now.
Yes, lighter. Yes, present. Again, to kind of tie these tie-ins from our conversation is that there's the preventative, right? And it kind of seed it, but then you're going to learn it. So when you are on a hockey rink, in between shifts, when you are on the soccer pitch and there's a throw in or free kick, and you have to be able to get back present.
Yep.
Because
Absolutely.
you're going to run towards the net and you're going to try to kick a ball. And a lot of times it's missed or it's saved. It's not always going in the net, that you have to recover. And you do that outside of the competition time, right? It could be at the sports lab. It could be at your home. And then you learn how to do it well, that you can just transfer it into that game where the game is speeding, but you have to be able to make it your own time. And I lovely. Like a lot of tie-ins today. I appreciate it. This has been really, really good.
Good.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you. I don't know if there's any questions. I think we're going to start wrapping things up, but as mentioned, I'm going to put information on our social media, just kind of keeping people up to date about the sports lab and the recovery suite piece. But if you don't mind, just kind of keep us posted, and we'll do our best to get that message out there.
Absolutely. That'd be great. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Lowell. I really appreciate it. We'll call it a day. Everyone.
Sounds good.
All right.
Take care. Thank you for everyone who joined today.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. All right, everyone. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.